Hey guys, this is a Surefire M720V Raid. This is one of the least well-known of all Surefire's weapon lights, despite the fact that it was the winner of a pretty sizable US SOCOM contract. It was not issued very widely, it was not a success on the commercial market, and Surefire has actually gone so far as to scrub all mention of it from their official website, which is kind of strange because they have information on their legacy weapon lights going back to the GWAT era and before, but nothing about the M720V, despite the fact that it's only about a decade old. If you'd like to know why that is, well, I do too, but Surefire isn't talking. So let's see if we can figure it out on our own. So this is the Surefire M720V Raid, and there are a couple of things in the name that you can pick up on. The M means it's a long gun light, even though the form factor looks similar to the X series, which are pistol lights. Surefire makes a long gun kit for the pistol lights if you want to use them on a rifle, but the M720V is for rifles only. And the V in the name means it's a vampire light, so a dual spectrum light capable of white light and infrared output. And what does Raid mean? Not a thing. In 2010, US SOCOM was looking to replace the Visible Bright Light 3 component of the SOPMOD program. At the time, the official SOPMOD weapon light was the Insight M3X, which was already about 5 years old. The M3X is really a pistol light with an accessory kit to make it more suitable for use on rifles. It's also an incandescent light, so it had been solidly outclassed by new LED-based weapon lights that were more durable with brighter output and longer runtime. But one advantage incandescent lights still had was that they could be used to provide IR illumination with the addition of a flip-up filter. IR filters are pretty clumsy, and taking an already pretty dim light and filtering it down to just the infrared component results in meager output. But that's not even an option with LED-based weapon lights. Incandescent bulbs put out a lot of infrared because they have a hot glowing filament in them, and IR is also sometimes known as heat radiation. White light emitters don't blast out a ton of bonus infrared, so you need a separate emitter for the IR component. In 2009, Surefire had introduced their first vampire head, the KM3, which has two LED emitters in a rotating bezel that allows users to select between visible or IR output. This design is still used in current models of Surefire's vampire lights, albeit in a streamlined form factor with improved output. So Surefire's 2010 VBL3 bid included the M620V with the KM3 head and the M720V, which is a very different form factor but uses the same vampire head technology and design. Even though Surefire won this updated VBL3 contract, you almost never see M720Vs or hear them talked about. They didn't have the same ubiquity or staying power as even older Surefire lights like the 6P and the Millenniums. Surefire doesn't have any product information about these on their website either. The M720V and 620V are not in their discontinued product lists, and the M720V doesn't show up on the list of all of Surefire's NSNs. Probably one of the only times you've seen one of these before is in the movie Sicario, where Josh Brolin's character uses a Daniel Defense M4 with the Block 2 Clone Correct SU-231 PEC and a Surefire M720V light. The M720V saw some limited use with the Army Airborne 28th EOD. You can actually see it in a few photos on their official Instagram page. The other thing the 28th is apparently fond of, or maybe just stuck with, are XPS EOTechs on LaRue risers. Maybe they prefer rear-mounted buttons, or maybe somebody clicked the wrong drop-down when ordering optics for the boys. Another group that adopted the M720V was the CIA's Global Response Staff, so that might explain why Josh Brolin's character in Sicario has one, since he's supposed to be CIA. Surefire's main competitor has always been Insight Technology, and the two companies traded contract wins back and forth throughout the history of the SOPMOD program. Insight made the original SOPMOD light, the VLI, which was replaced with the Surefire M962 as part of VBL2, which was in turn replaced by the Insight M3X, which was theoretically replaced by the M620V and M720V. But the weapon light that ended up becoming more common was the Insight WMX200, which was also an LED-based dual-spectrum light. We'll have to talk more about that some other time if I can ever afford a WMX200. I'm not about to drop $1,000 in a bidding war against some Block 2 clone fag just to make a video about a crummy weapon light that was only popular because it looks good next to a PEC 15. So why was the Surefire M720V Raid so unpopular and so short-lived, to the extent that Surefire doesn't even want to admit it exists? In a word, complexity. The M720V is way too complicated, and that made it large, heavy, and incredibly expensive despite not performing better than any of Surefire's other lights of the era. First of all, there's the complicated switchology. The M720V is dual spectrum like the other Surefire V-series lights. On these early vampires, you pull the bezel forward and twist it to switch between white light, IR light, and off. The M720V also has a pair of mode switches, one on either side of the light body. The IR selector has 3 power levels, and the white side selector switch has 4 settings: high, medium, flashlight, and strobe. What the hell does that mean? If the 2 power levels are high and medium, doesn't that make medium the lowest setting, and therefore the de facto low setting? And what the fuck does flashlight mean? The whole thing is a flashlight. We'll get back to this. The M720V has a built-in fire button on the angled underside of the body, and it also came with a unique dual-pad tape switch that looks like the SR07D IT dual-lead switch, but only has one Surefire Scout-compatible downlead. The M720V overall kind of looks like a pistol light that was adapted for rifle use, not dissimilar to the Insight M3X, but about 4 times larger. It takes 2 CR123 batteries side by side and has the easily accessible battery door of a Surefire pistol light, angled slightly to make it easier to swap batteries with the light still mounted to the gun. But you still have to unplug the remote switch in order to get the battery door all the way open, which seems like an oversight. The base of the M720V is drilled for the old style of Surefire long gun light mount before they switched over to the smaller Scout mount pattern, which is now ubiquitous in the industry. It's absurdly overbuilt, but that's how you know it's mil-spec. Alright, let's talk about what those switches do. The switchology on the M720V is extremely complicated, more so than probably any other Surefire of all time. So, we have got a remote switch with 2 pads, we've got a switch on the light itself, we've got a rotating bezel to control if we are on white light, IR light, or the safe in-between position. And we've also have 2 switches. These are like power or mode select switches. One of them is the power select switch for the IR side, and the other one is the mode and power select switch for the white light side. So what we got here is a light with a whole bunch of logic, way too much to be controlled with a simple circuit, so there is a logic board inside there that has to interpret the position of the bezel, both switches, the remote switch input, and the on-body switch input. So on the white light side, we have got the high position, the medium position, the flashlight position, and the strobe position. We don't have a low position because as long as the weapon light is in anything but the flashlight position, then the button on the light itself is actually the low position. So we have a switch plugged in, we have the light in high mode, and that means that the dome switch on the light will activate the lowest power illuminator. That's for navigation or, task lighting, something like that. Then we have the momentary only button on the front of the tape switch and the constant on button at the rear of the tape switch. Now you can also double tap the fire button on the switch unit itself. If you want to go into constant on, you cannot do that with the momentary only button on the switch. So this switch seems to know something about the difference between these 2 buttons. Also, compared to a more current production Surefire tape switch like the SR07D, which is a dual pad, that one actually has a clicking mechanism on the constant on button. So when you click it down, it closes the circuit. This doesn't. This is just a single tap. This doesn't click on and off. It just sends a different type of signal, and the light knows to interpret that as a constant on press. So we've got our high weapon light output, medium weapon light output, and then with the dome button we have our navigation light. Then we can also go into flashlight mode. Flashlight mode disables input from the remote switch, and it enables high output from the dome switch. Again, we can get this to go into constant on with a double tap. In theory, flashlight mode serves 2 purposes. 1, you can dismount it from the gun and use it as a handheld light. 2, if your tape switch becomes damaged, then you can go into flashlight mode and you can still access the full output of the light using the onboard button. The 4th position on the white light switch is strobe mode. Again, that doesn't affect the dome switch on the light itself because that can only give you, the navigation power mode, but the tape switch will give you temporary strobe or lock-on strobe. Thankfully, the infrared side is a lot simpler. We've got high, medium, and low. That's just the power select, and the behavior of the infrared side is inherited from the white light side. If the white light switch is in high or medium and the bezel is in IR mode, then that hands off control of the power level over to the IR switch. So we still have a very low level IR illuminator accessible on the dome switch, and then we have the temporary and constant on switches for IR on the remote switch. If we drop it into flashlight mode, then once again we are able to access the full power of IR output from the flashlight. And if we go into strobe mode, it goes back to being like it's in high mode. There is no IR strobe function. I did some high-effort Googling to figure out why the M720V never went anywhere, despite winning a pretty high-profile contract. I found a completely unverified forum post suggesting the M720V had an issue wherein radio transmissions would interfere with the logic board and cause the light to activate when guys would key up their radios. At first that sounded pretty unlikely, but after playing around with the M720V, I think I believe it. Most weapon lights are extremely simple. When you press the button, it completes the circuit and the light turns on. The M720V, on the other hand, definitely needs a logic board to interpret the position of the bezel, the mode select switches, the fire button, and the tape switch input. This is kind of obvious when you use the M720V because it has a tiny bit of input delay, just like a laser aiming module. So the M720V was way too complicated, might have been prone to going off at random, and the complexity made them absurdly expensive. The retail price was about $800 back in 2010 dollars. Adjusted for inflation, that's like infinity dollars. The M720V can't have been a big seller on the commercial market, and if for whatever reason the US government stopped buying them, I can totally see Surefire saying good riddance and going back about their business. So why doesn't Surefire want to talk about it? Are they just embarrassed because it was a failure? I doubt it. My guess is they didn't really want to make this thing in the first place. The Surefire M720V and the Insight WMX200 both seem like lights designed to fulfill a big list of features and specs handed down from the government. Both of them ended up being overly complicated, very heavy, and very expensive, which I'm sure didn't cause US SOCOM to look inwards and seek personal growth. So, if you want an M720V for your Sicario or 28th EOD clone build, be on the lookout for fakes and be prepared to way overspend. These are rare and expensive if you find a good one, but they are still cheaper than the Insight WMX200, which is SOPMOD clone correct, bro. I bought an M720V for a suspiciously good price from an eBay seller with a suspiciously low feedback rating, and you'll never guess what happened next. So then I overpaid for this one because I had to finish the video, right? The M720V's semi-clone correct status combined with its rarity mean there are more fakes than real ones on the market. The most surefire way, haha, to know you're getting a real one is to see a picture of the circuit board on the inside of the battery compartment. I haven't seen any fakes successfully reproduce the Surefire marked PCB. Or you could do me a favor and buy this one so I can get something even older and worse. Alright, that's all we got for today. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you like this channel, please subscribe, and if you'd like to support me directly, you can do so via the links to Subscribestar and my Linktree page in the video description. See you guys next time. Alright, sorry.